Well, hello viewers. Well, it's been a long time, hasn't it? My apologies. This is probably the longest time ever between making videos, for which I'm sorry. Stuff gets in the way sometimes. Now, before we get started, I just want to thank those patrons who have been still putting money into my Patreon account while I've been quiet. That's very admirable. Thank you very much for doing that. Hopefully this video will kickstart the channel again and we can get back into making regular videos. I also noticed I tipped over 6,000 subscribers, which is pretty amazing. So thank you all for the support. So to ease myself back into it, I thought I'd do a quick video on this radiation contamination meter. Some of my earlier videos featured some of my various radiation meters and Geiger counters and the like, but I've not featured that sort of thing in a while, so given I picked this up the other day, I thought it would be a good way to brush the dust off the camera and get back into it. So I bagged this meter the other day off eBay. I was slightly surprised it didn't sell for more than I picked it up for, but I'm certainly not complaining about that. So in the end, it only cost me 25 quid. It is a rather professional grade contamination meter from a German company called FAG. You see that logo on the front there. Now I think this meter has been around for a while in both analog and digital forms. It seems to have been rebadged a few times as well by different companies, and possibly FAG have been bought out and owned by different people along the way. So this does seem to come with a few different brands on it sometimes. And there are a few variations on this meter. As I said, there was an analog version, so instead of it being digital, you had an analog meter, but I believe the detectors that this uses are all just the same. Presumably the early ones were the analog meter, and then in the 1990s they upgraded them to digital and put an LCD screen on, all that sort of stuff. So this particular meter dates from 1995 and it is clearly a digital meter. It's pretty chunky and not exactly lightweight. What drew me to this meter though was the size of the detector and the fact that it does alpha, beta and gamma detection. Though the unusual thing about this is the detector is removable and replaceable with other types. This particular one, which is mounted on the bottom here, I'll go into the detail on this in a minute, but this particular one uses butane, which is a consumable, which is unlike a normal Geiger counter. Normally a Geiger tube is permanently filled with a particular set of gases, and you can't change it or refill it in any way, but on this particular one it uses butane and it's disposable and you have to keep recharging it with butane. So when I first picked this up, it was listed as parts only, not working. It obviously hadn't been tested at all. To be honest, I'm not even sure if they realised where the batteries go, to be honest, because it took me a little bit of time to go, where are the batteries? And they actually go in the handle here. There's a little clip on the side. I wonder whether the people selling it didn't actually realise that there's batteries to go in here. Now, thankfully, I have discovered this is actually working. I'm not going to power it up just yet because it is devoid of gas at the moment, for reasons that I will go into later. So I'll just give you a quick look around it. On the back here we have a rubber cover. This is a push button which ejects the detector unit off the actual meter. We've got a little plug here, which, if I can get it off, there we go. You can see in there's a little old-fashioned DIN socket, and that is an RS-232 port. Right, so I'll show you the detector, which is a rather nice looking unit. So we've got a stainless steel shield which goes over here, and then you can see the really nice large window for detecting, as I said, alpha, beta and gamma. Now this detector can eject off the unit by pushing this in here and removing the actual detector. So we can see we've got an aluminium bezel, then there's a wire mesh protecting the detector underneath, and you can see a hexagonal pattern of wires which in a way they stop the very, very thin mylar screen, which is underneath this, from blowing out when you actually inflate it with butane. I'm not sure whether you can see that, but there's actually warnings here about using it in hot environments and to keep away from flame for obvious reasons. Now, obviously this is runs on butane, so you need to be able to fill it. We have a filling port just here. That just takes you can use a standard butane lighter refill gas. I suspect you're probably supposed to use something which is a bit higher in purity, but the butane gas, it seems to work just fine for me, and obviously I don't need things like accuracy or anything like that, so I'm just using normal lighter fluid, lighter gas I should say. Next along here we've got a little screw plug that is for accessing part of the reservoir for the gas, and then we have an outlet vent just over here, and over on the other side we have an unknown port there. I'm not sure what that's for, it's completely plugged off, and we have a small button here which I will explain what that's for in just a moment. On the back we have what is clearly a PCB under there, which has been metallized, and there's a couple of layers in that. So we have a connection just in here, and there's a couple of connections here as well. Now I think what they're doing here, this little pad here makes contact with some pogo pins on the actual meter. And you can actually see these here, just here, little spring-loaded pogo pins. I suspect that is just to indicate to the meter what type of detector is attached. And then this connection here in the centre, which is just here, again on a large pogo pin, that will be the anode connection, and I suspect that the cathode is on the outside clip here, on this bit here, or just here, which is effectively the ground on the meter. So there are some reference numbers on here. I'm not sure whether you're going to be able to read them. I think you can just there. So it's type DFZ butane, which is obviously butane. Model number is 42496/30. So looking at the back of the meter, as I said, we've got those pogo pins. We also have a little push button switch here. That is certainly going to be for disconnecting the power, shutting the system down when you eject off the detector plate. So what I'll do here, I'll just remove the 6 screws that hold this in, and then we can take a look at the PCB. Right, so we've got the cover with a nice rubbery cover over it, and that is the eject mechanism. And we can see the back side of the PCB. We can see the ground connection to the rear plate and the anode, and then the pogo pins to make contact with that little ID tag thing that was on the back of the detector, and that is the little switch, obviously like a safety cutout switch. So we've got a really nice looking through hole, old school PCB layout, lots of straight tracks with right angles on them. This is actually looks a little bit more complicated than a typical Geiger counter would, because it uses the gas proportional detector. It does actually allow you to discriminate between beta, gamma and alpha particles. So this does mean that you can put the meter into a mode so it filters out all the beta and gamma events that happen in the tube, so you're only viewing or measuring the alpha particle content. So there's going to be a little bit more analog stuff going on in here to discriminate between the different energy levels. And of course that then feeds back into the microprocessor, which in this case is a Toshiba variant on a Z80. That's just there, so pretty old school stuff. Next to that we have a small EEPROM holding the firmware with FHT111M written on it and version 2.2. Next up from that we've got a small SRAM. This is actually battery backed, and presumably this gives you the RAM for the CPU and some storage area for taking measurements and various things that you can save and recall later by RS-232 into some PC software. Next to that we've got a beeper for providing your typical click function. There's some 7.4 series logic interfacing the analog stuff into the CPU. Just in this space here there was a small lithium battery, but I actually removed that because it was completely flat and I didn't want to have it starting to leak. So a little bit further up this end we have what is quite clearly a voltage multiplier. We've got a small transformer there, so I would imagine that's been switched at a fairly decent frequency, and then the voltage from that is being multiplied up, fed into these capacitors here to give us DC, and then fed into this metal can, which is obviously doing all the analog front end stuff. And then just above that we've got various things. I'm not actually going to try and figure out what they are for. I mean, there's going to be a power supply stuff and things like that in here. We've got a battery connection just here, and then we've got a ribbon cable running over for the LCD and one for the membrane keypad. And just on the end we've got that DIN connector which houses the RS-232 port. Right, let's pop all this back together. We'll shove some gas in it and I'll show you it working. Right, so the way you would be expected to use this is you would charge this up with butane. That fills up a small reservoir which is built inside, and then from that reservoir you then depress this button here, which is called a purge button, and that releases gas from the reservoir into the actual chamber area, which pressurizes the chamber, and any excess gas is vented out of this port here. So this port here holds the main detector at a particular pressure. It's quite low, and then as that depletes, you can then vent more gas into the chamber by pressing the button, which is released from the actual butane reservoir. Now unfortunately this is particularly leaky. It doesn't hold its gas. Theoretically, according to the instructions, a full charge on the butane tank should give you about 5 days worth of usage, by allowing you to depress this, I think 2 or 3 times a day to keep it inflated, but mine just seems to lose all its gas within possibly a couple of hours or so. So there's obviously a bit of a leak somewhere. I've actually changed the O-rings on these ports here. This one is actually sealed in, but I don't think that one is the actual problem anyway. I believe what's happening is this button here, which releases the gas from the reservoir, is actually leaking, and it slowly leaks gas out of the reservoir into the chamber, which is then vented out of here. So basically what happens is a full charge of butane just keeps the thing inflated for a few hours, and then it just runs out. So it's no big deal, and I'm not entirely tempted to start taking this to pieces to try and discover if there's any replaceable seals on the inside. So I think I'm just going to leave this as it is, and just have it using a lot of gas. So I'll just give it a charge with some bog standard lighter gas. and if I then depress the that noise you just heard there was the vent, this vent blowing off. So that is up to pressure, and you can see that it's inflated the very thin aluminized mylar probably, and that is now ready for use. So let's just put this back on while I'm handling it. Clip that on there and then clip that onto there. Right, so if I just turn this on, it takes a few seconds to settle down. And it should end up around about between sort of 4 and 8 counts per second. I believe that's what it's reading here, counts per second. Now, this particular meter does actually have effectively a database of known sources that you can set it to, and it can actually work out the number of becquerels your source is actually emitting. So, but unfortunately I can't actually get to any of those because it doesn't seem to let me. I think there might be some kind of lockout which is preventing me from doing that. I'm not entirely sure how that would be, given that I've removed the battery out of this, so every time it turns on it resets back to factory. But that's just the way it is. It probably wouldn't be much use, that function, for me anyway, so I'm just going to leave it as it is. So we've got a couple of functions on here. We've got a backlight, we've got the speaker, and we can see that we've got alpha, beta and gamma set on here. So we're reading all three at the moment, and that is the current background radiation here in the lab, which is completely normal. So I can just demonstrate this in use with a few of my little samples that I've got. The first one here is just Fiesta ware, which is uranium oxide pottery, which was made in the 1950s and 60s. You can pick this up on eBay in little fragments, and I've just got a little bit there. So that is based on uranium oxide, so it's going to emit mostly beta, gamma, and probably a bit of alpha. So if I bring the meter over the top, you can see it's getting a really nice strong signal off that. So that's that about 300 counts per second off that. Obviously because they've got a huge big window there. And of course we can turn off the beta and gamma detection. Now, given that I have this inside a plastic bag, there's going to be no alpha. So if I turn this off, turn this onto alpha mode, it will go very quiet. Yep. So there will be virtually nothing coming off that with the plastic bag on it. I'll just silence that. So I've just removed that pottery out of the plastic bag, so we will now be able to detect what will be a very small amount of alpha. Yeah, very small amount there. Turn all alpha, beta and gamma back on. Get the full reading. So the next source to show you is this Americium 241 sample. This is actually from one of my old domestic smoke alarms. They often have a Americium source in there to ionise the air and detect smoke particles. So I've just removed that out, kept it in its little plastic thing so it doesn't get lost. And the Americium is a massive alpha emitter, so that should really make the alpha part of this counter sing a little bit. So if I just bring this in and have alpha, beta and gamma on, you'll see there's a a fairly decent response there, but as I bring this closer in, you can see there's a rather large signal coming off that, but that is actually including all the beta and gamma that might be coming off it as well. Now what we can do is turn off, so we're on to alpha only. And as I start to get within, a centimetre or so, we'll start picking that up. And then nothing further away, because obviously all the alpha particles are absorbed by the air. Okay, so I think that's really quite a nice meter there. I'm very pleased with the purchase on that one. It's certainly the biggest detector I've got on any of my counters, which is really nice. A bit of a shame that it loses its gas, but then butane lighter fuel is not particularly expensive to buy, and it's readily available anyway, so I will probably just leave this as it is and be perfectly happy with it. So thanks very much for watching. I hope you found this one interesting. Hopefully this will get me back into making more and more videos. Obviously the Quantel paint box stuff is still ongoing. It has not lost my attention. It's just been sidelined again, unfortunately, but you never know what things come along to actually prompt things to start the ball rolling again, as it were. So we will see what happens on that. Okay, thanks again everyone, and I'll see you on the next video. Bye for now.